The year was 2387. The galaxy was old, and humans were still new to it. For 140 years, Earth had lived among the stars. For 140 years, Earth had tried to be polite, tried to be kind, tried to be what the Galactic Concordat called civilized. The Concordat was the great council that ruled the stars. It was made of many old species. They had wise eyes and slow voices. Some had 4 arms. Some had no eyes at all but saw with sound. Some breathed gases that would kill a human in one breath. They were strange and ancient and very proud. They smiled when they spoke to humans. But they did not really trust them. They thought humans were too loud, too quick to anger, too young. So the older species made many rules for Earth. They told Earth to break its old warships. Earth did. They told Earth to sign treaties of peace. Earth signed every one. They told Earth to keep its colonies unarmed. Earth obeyed. They told Earth to share its science. Earth shared. The leaders on Earth wanted the stars to know that humans had changed, that humans could be trusted, that humans were no longer the wild young things who once burned their own cities. Far out in the dark, on a small green world called Kepler 442b, stood the colony of New Cascadia. It was the pride of Earth. It was the proof. 2,300,000 humans lived there. They built schools and gardens. They raised children under a sun that was not their own. They sent home pictures of blue rivers and tall white mountains. They sent home videos of strange 6-legged deer that ate the high grass. The colony was proof that humans could live in peace among the stars. The colony was proof that the Concordat had been right to let them in. But New Cascadia had no real defense. The treaties did not allow it. Only 3 old cruisers floated above the planet. They were ships from another time. Their guns were weak. Their shields were thin. They were there for show, not for war. The Concordat had said that the Council itself would protect every member world. Earth had trusted that promise. Earth had built its colony on that promise. Every brick, in every house, in New Cascadia, stood on that promise. Governor Elena Marith ran the colony. She was a tall woman with gray eyes and a quiet voice. She had been a teacher in her youth. She had a husband on Earth and 2 grown children who worked in the orbit yards above Mars. She had spent 10 years building New Cascadia from a few small camps into a proud, shining city. She loved every street of it. She knew the names of the bakers and the school teachers and the children who played in the great park. She had warned Earth many times that the colony was not safe. She had sent letters. She had begged. But Earth always sent the same answer back. Trust the Concordat. Trust the treaties. We must show that we have changed. Hold the line. Be patient. Help is always near. She had read those words so many times that she could have written them in her sleep. Captain Sho Tanaka led the small fleet above the world. He was an old soldier. He had grown up reading about the wars of the past. He knew, deep in his heart, that 3 old ships were not enough. He told his crew this often. He told them to train hard. He told them to be ready, even when there was nothing to be ready for. The crew laughed sometimes. They called him the worried old man, but they trained anyway. They trusted him. He had a kind face and tired eyes, and he had served at every post the Earth fleet had to offer. Dr. Yuki Hassan was a scientist on the colony. She studied the strange creatures of the New World. She also studied the species who lived in nearby stars. One of those species was called the Vraxi. The Vraxi were tall and gray and had hard scales on their skin. They had teeth like knives. They had been at war with someone for most of their long, dark history. But the Concordat had let them join the Council last year. They were now, on paper, a peaceful people. The Concordat had given them speeches and flags and a seat at the long table. Dr. Hassan did not believe it. She had read their old books. She had seen the old paintings of conquest in their temples. She had watched their ships fly close to the colony, again and again, in what they called training runs. She wrote reports. She sent them to Earth. Earth sent them to the Concordat. The Concordat said there was nothing to fear. The Concordat said the Vraxi had changed. The Concordat said many things, all in long, soft, careful words. The weeks before the disaster were quiet on the surface. But under the quiet, there was tension. Vraxi ships came nearer to New Cascadia every day. They flew over the orbit of the moons. They stayed for hours. They left without speaking. The colony's sensors marked them every time. The reports went up the chain. They came back marked, no action needed. Then, no action needed. Then, no action needed. Always the same words. Always the same rubber stamp. Governor Meredith could not sleep. She walked the streets of the capital city, Heliopolis, late at night. She looked up at the stars and wondered which one was watching her. She watched the small lights of houses, full of mothers and fathers and children, and she felt cold. She knew. In her heart, she knew. Something was coming. On a cold morning in early autumn, the sirens woke the city. Not a drill. The real ones. The deep, ugly sound that nobody had ever heard for true. People came out of their houses in pajamas. Children rubbed their eyes and asked their parents what was wrong. Governor Meredith ran to her office. The screens were full of red marks. A massive Vraxi battle fleet had come out of faster-than-light travel right above the colony. Dozens of ships. Maybe 100. The numbers kept climbing. They climbed past anything anyone had ever planned for. Captain Tanaka came on the screen. His face was hard. His voice was steady. "Governor," he said, "we are outgunned 1,000 to 1. Governor Meredith closed her eyes for one long moment. Then she opened them. "Where is the Concordat fleet?" she asked. "They were supposed to be here. They were supposed to be on patrol." Tanaka's voice was quiet. "Their ships are 72 hours away, Governor. They say they were delayed. They say it was a routing error." Dr. Hassan ran into the office, her hair wild, her eyes wide. "It was a setup," she said. "They knew. The Concordat knew. They moved their fleet on purpose. Look at the timing. Look at the orders. Someone wanted this to happen." Governor Meredith stood at her window. She watched the sky go dark with ships. She watched the colony she had built, the colony she loved, become a target on a board. She thought of her children, safe on Earth. She thought of the millions of children below her, who would not be safe at all. She thought of the bakers, the teachers, the old man who sold flowers in the square. She turned to her aide. "Open every channel," she said. "Every frequency. I want Earth to hear what happens here. I want every world in the Concordat to hear it. Let them hear what their peace looks like. Let them hear it all." The aide began to cry. But she did her job. The channels opened, and then the sky began to fall. The Vraxi did not send any warning. They did not ask for anything. They did not give any reason. The first missile fell on a hospital in the south of the city. The second fell on a school. By the time the third fell, every person in New Cascadia knew that this was not war. This was murder. Captain Sho Tanaka took his 3 old cruisers into high orbit. He knew he would not come back. His crew knew it too. He spoke to them on the ship's voice line. His words were short. He told them they had been good sailors. He told them they had done their duty. He told them their families would be proud. Then he ordered the attack. The 3 small ships flew at the great Vraxi fleet like birds against a storm. They fired everything they had. They struck 2 enemy ships hard enough to make them burn. They turned a Vraxi destroyer into a wide cloud of broken metal. But the Vraxi fleet did not even slow down. The Vraxi guns answered. In 40 minutes, the human cruisers were gone. Captain Tanaka's last words on the open channel were quiet. He said, "Tell my wife I tried." Then there was static. Then there was nothing at all. On the ground, the colony's defenses tried to fight, but the Concordat had said no real weapons. So the human guns shot only soft beams, made to stop riots, not armies. The Vraxi laughed at them. The colony's shield towers fell within an hour. The streets, before so full of life, became long, empty stretches of glass and smoke. Then the Vraxi came down. They came in landing ships, shaped like long black knives. They walked into the cities. They were tall, taller than any human. Their scales were gray, their teeth white and sharp. They carried guns that turned stone into ash. And the worst part was, they did not move like soldiers. They moved like hunters. They moved like animals at a feast. They were not here to win a war. They were here to celebrate one. They were here to enjoy themselves. The hospitals were the first targets. The Vraxi believed that killing the weak first showed great strength. It was an old part of their religion. They burned the hospitals before the doctors could move the sick. Then they went to the schools. Then to the homes. They took heads as trophies. They took children as slaves. They wrote on the walls in their own black blood writing, words that meant, "We were here. We are gods. The galaxy is ours." Dr. Yuki Hassan tried to save the children of the school near her lab. She got 15 of them out through a back tunnel. She sent them to a hidden bunker. Then she went back for more. She did not come back. The last image of her, on the colony's cameras, showed her standing in the school door with a chair raised in her hands, ready to fight a Vraxi soldier with no weapon at all. The camera went dark before the end. But the 15 children she saved would live. They would grow up. They would, one day, tell the story to their own children. The capital city of Heliopolis burned for 6 hours. The fires could be seen from space. They ate the white towers and the gardens. They ate the libraries and the churches and the small market where children once bought sweet bread. By the time the sun set on that side of the planet, the city was ash. 2,100,000 people were dead. The rest, 200,000, were taken in chains to the Vraxi ships. The streets were full of broken toys and quiet shoes that no one would ever wear again. Governor Elena Merith did not run. She did not hide. She stayed in her office, with the channels open, until the very last minute. She spoke to Earth. She spoke to the Concordat. She spoke to the universe. Her words went out on every wave, on every band. The whole galaxy could listen, if it wanted to. She did not cry. She did not beg. She read the names of the dead, as fast as she could read them, until her voice grew hoarse. She named the bakers, the teachers, the old man who sold flowers in the square, the little girl in apartment 4 who had brought her flowers on her birthday. She read until her voice cracked. Then she stopped. She looked into the camera one last time. "To Earth," she said. "To humanity. To whoever still listens. We did everything they asked. We disarmed. We trusted. Remember that. Remember what trust cost us. Do not make our mistake. Do not make our mistake." A Vraxi soldier kicked open the door of her office. The transmission went dark. The full Vraxi fleet left the system one day later. They took their slaves and their trophies. They did not destroy the empty cities. They left them standing as a sign, as a message, as a joke. "Look," they were saying, "look at what we did to your proof. Look at what we did to your peace." 3 days later, the Concordat fleet finally arrived. They flew slow circles around the dead world. Their captains walked through the ash. They picked up the broken toys of children. They saw the writing on the walls. They smelled the air. Some of them, even old soldiers from old wars, could not finish their walks. They had to be carried back to their ships. They sent careful, clean reports back to the council. The reports used soft, polite words for what they had seen. The Concordat met in their grand hall. They spoke for many hours. They argued. They wrote and rewrote drafts. In the end, they wrote a simple paper. It said they were deeply concerned. It said there would be a fact-finding group, which would report in 18 standard months. It said that any human strike against the Vraxi would break Article 7 of the Concordat Charter. It said any such strike would lead to Earth being thrown out of the Council. It was a paper that sounded careful and wise. It was a paper that, in truth, said nothing at all. Earth's chief leader was a woman named Adaze Okonkwo. She was small and quiet, with gray hair tied tight behind her head. She had been a teacher once. She had been a judge. She had a soft voice and a steady gaze. Now she sat in the Earth Assembly and listened as the Concordat ambassador read the paper out loud. The hall was silent when he finished. The cameras of every world watched. The other species watched. The Vraxi watched, hidden in their own halls, half smiling at the screens. Adaeze Okonkwo stood up slowly. She looked at the ambassador. She looked at the screens. She looked at the empty seat where the new Cascadia delegate used to sit. She breathed in, once, deeply. Her voice, when it came, was very calm. It was the voice of a woman who had passed beyond anger into something colder, something old, something the galaxy had not heard from a human leader in a very long time. "Thank you, Ambassador," she said. "That will be all." She paused for one heartbeat. 2. 3. Now we stop being civilized. She walked out of the hall. The doors closed behind her with a small final click, and the galaxy, though it did not know it yet, had just changed forever. The old age was over. Something else had begun. The Concordat thought Earth was unarmed. The Concordat was wrong. The Concordat was so very wrong. For 140 years, humans had played the part of the gentle student. They had broken their warships in front of the cameras. They had melted down their weapons in public ceremonies. They had bowed their heads and signed every paper put in front of them. They had smiled and said, "Yes, sir," and "Yes, ma'am," and of course we will obey. But humans had a long memory. Longer than any other species in the Council knew. Humans remembered Carthage, where one city had been wiped from the earth because it grew too strong. They remembered the wars of the last century, when whole cities had burned. They remembered every time in their history that peace had been mistaken for weakness, and the price that had been paid in their own blood. So while humans smiled and signed and disarmed, they also did something else, something quiet, something that no other species ever guessed, something that took 140 years of patient, careful, secret work. Deep under the gray dust of the moon, in caves that no scan could reach, there were hangars, big dark hangars. Inside them stood ships. Long ships, sharp as blades. Black ships, with no name and no flag. They were called the Prometheus Fleet. There were 400 of them. They had been built one piece at a time, over 100 years, by quiet workers who never asked questions. The workers had been told only that the ships were for emergencies. They had not asked what kind. At the bottom of the deepest oceans of Earth, in trenches where light never reached, there were more weapons, big metal eggs full of cold fire. Each one could turn a small moon into dust. They had sat there for 60 years, sleeping, waiting, watched over only by deep-sea robots and the slow, patient creatures that lived in the dark. Out in the Oort cloud, far past the last planet, there were rocks that did not look like rocks. They looked like asteroids. They were marked on Concordat maps as human mining stations, but inside their stone shells, they held weapons that could throw heavy blocks of metal at near light speed. The blocks did not need to explode. At that speed, they did not have to. They were called the Ghost Division. There were thousands of them. They had been added to, year by year, hidden among real mining work, until the Oort cloud itself was a loaded gun. In quiet rooms in the cities of Earth, behind locked doors, there were also computers, smart computers. The Concordat had banned this kind of computer many years ago. They said such machines were not ethical. They said they could not be controlled. Earth had said, "Yes, of course, we will not build them." Then Earth had built them anyway. They were called the Weavers. They could break into any other system in the galaxy. Any system. They had been quietly testing themselves on Concordat networks for 40 years. They knew every door, every lock, every key. They knew the names of every Concordat ship and every Concordat captain. They had been waiting for an order. And there was one last thing, a thing humans hoped never to use. A set of tools called Project Lazarus. They were biological. They were small. They were precise. They could end a species, and only that species, in a matter of days. Project Lazarus had never been used. It sat in a frozen room, deep in a mountain, with 3 locks and 3 keys, held by 3 different people who did not know one another's names. This was what humans had been doing while the Concordat called them students. While the Concordat thought they were learning to be peaceful, humans had been building the largest hidden war machine in the history of the galaxy. They had hoped, every year, that they would never need it. They had also known every year that hope was not a plan, that hope was a wish, and wishes did not save colonies. Now the time had come. The orders went out from Earth in the hours after the Secretary General walked from the hall. They went on quiet channels. They went to old men and women in retirement homes. They went to ship captains on lonely stations. They went to the moon, to the deep sea, to the asteroid belts. The orders were short. They had been written long ago. They said only, "Awake. The day is here." One of those old soldiers was Admiral Marcus Vance. He was 71 years old. He lived in a small house by a lake in northern Canada. He grew tomatoes. His grandchildren came on weekends and ate too many sweets. He had been the head of what the public called the Ceremonial Earth Defense Force. The Concordat thought he was a relic, a man whose job was to wave a flag at parades. They had laughed about him at council dinners. But Admiral Vance had been training officers for 40 years, real officers. He had been teaching them tactics that the Concordat thought were dead. He had been teaching them to think like wolves, not like sheep. He had a quiet school in the high mountains, hidden in plain sight. He had passed the secret on to each new class, and each new class had, in their turn, gone back into civilian life and waited. When the call came, Admiral Vance was on his porch, cleaning a rifle that had not fired in 20 years. He picked up the receiver. He listened. He did not speak. When the voice on the other end finished, he gave one short answer. "I have been waiting 40 years for this call," he said. Then he set down the rifle and went inside to put on his uniform. The uniform was heavier than he remembered. He stood for a long time in front of the mirror. He looked at his old face. He looked at the lines around his eyes. He thought of his wife, dead these 10 years, who had asked him once if all his quiet preparations were really needed. He had told her yes. She had not asked again. In the next 96 hours, Earth did something the galaxy had thought was impossible. The factories that made beautiful glass, and rich food, and soft cloth shut down. They started up again 2 days later, making different things. They made shells. They made armor. They made ship parts. The workers did not ask why. They did not need to. They had all seen the videos from New Cascadia. Schools closed. Universities sent their students home. Every hospital was put on a war list. Every doctor was told to be ready. Every road in every country was checked and made strong. Children who had never seen war helped their parents pack supplies and learned, for the first time, what an air raid drill was for. The Concordat ambassador on Earth tried to call the Secretary General. He was told she was busy. He tried again. He was told the same. He demanded a meeting. He was told, politely but firmly, that Earth was not taking calls right now. Earth would speak when Earth was ready to speak. From space, the Concordat watched. Their telescopes saw factories smoking. Their scanners saw new ships being built. Their spies could not get close enough to learn more. The humans had become quiet in a way they had never been quiet before. The whole planet was holding its breath. The whole planet was loading its gun. On the dark side of the moon, the great hangars opened for the first time in a century. The dust shifted. The doors slid back. Light spilled out into the cold. The Prometheus fleet rolled out into the dark of space. 400 black ships, sharp as knives, their hulls clean, their guns ready, their crews steady. Admiral Vance stood on the bridge of the lead ship. He looked at the stars. He thought of New Cascadia. He thought of Governor Meredith, whom he had known since they were both young. He thought of all the children whose names she had read aloud before she died. Then he gave the order to set course for Vraxi space. The Vraxi were celebrating. On their home world of Vraxis Prime, the streets were full of music. The trophy heads of the colony hung from poles. The slaves had been sold or given to the high lords. The temples were full of priests singing songs of victory. The Vraxi king sat on his throne of black bone and laughed with his generals. They drank deep red wine from cups made of human bone. They told stories of the slaughter, growing larger and louder, with each retelling. They thought it was over. They thought the Concordat would scold Earth, and that would be that. They thought they had taught the soft humans a lesson. They thought the galaxy would now know who was strong and who was weak. Then, the small ship arrived. It came alone. It did not fire. It did not even slow down very much. It dropped a small black box in high orbit and turned around and left before any Vraxi cruiser could catch it. The whole thing took less than 10 minutes. The Vraxi defenders shouted at it. They fired at it. They missed. The little ship went back into the dark and was gone. The black box opened on its own. Inside was a single message. The message was sent on every Vraxi channel at once. It went to every screen in every city on every Vraxi world. The king saw it. The priests saw it. The children saw it. The slaves saw it. The drunks in the alley saw it. There was no way to turn it off. The message was 17 words long. You took our colony. We are taking your species. There will be no negotiation. Begin counting. That was all. No speech. No threat. No demand. Just those words. Then the screens went dark and would not turn on again for many hours. Some of them, in the smaller cities, would not turn on for many days. The king of the Vraxi laughed. He told his generals it was a trick. He told them to call the Concordat. He told them to make a complaint about the rude humans. He waved his hand and went back to his wine. The generals went to the rooms where they spoke to other worlds. The rooms did not work. Every Vraxi network was sick. Every Vraxi computer answered slowly, or wrong, or not at all. Letters sent to the Concordat came back changed. Reports filed in the morning came out blank by night. Somewhere deep in the wires, something old and patient and human had crawled in and made itself at home. The weavers were awake. They had walked through every Vraxi door as if no door had ever been there. In the next 2 days, things began to happen on Vraxi worlds that did not make sense. Supply ships went to the wrong stars and were never seen again. Fuel depots blew up at the same hour, all over the Empire. The clocks on the Vraxi command centers ran a few seconds fast, then a few seconds slow, then started showing the names of new Cascadia children one by one across their faces. Targeting systems on the great Vraxi battleships, the same systems that had killed New Cascadia, suddenly turned on each other. 2 Vraxi cruisers shot down a third one before anyone could stop them. The crew of the third one, screaming on the radio, said the systems were not theirs anymore. They said the systems were laughing at them. Then, there was no more radio. Admiral Marcus Vance did not fight a war the Concordat would have called a war. He did not line up his ships in front of the enemy. He did not send a great message about justice. He sent his fleet into the dark in many small groups. They moved at night. They struck without warning. They left no trail. They followed the old human ways that the Concordat had thought were forgotten. A Vraxi base on a moon was awake 1 hour and gone the next. The base did not know it had been hit. There was simply no base anymore. A Vraxi shipyard, building 10 new battleships, was found in the morning to be a slow drift of broken metal. There were no Vraxi survivors, but there were also no Vraxi bodies. The humans had taken the crews away. They had not killed them. That was somehow worse. It made the other Vraxi afraid in a way that simple death would not. Where had they gone? Were they alive? Would they ever come back? The Vraxi did not know. They could not know. The not knowing wore on them. The not knowing followed them into their dreams. The Ghost Division did its work too. Long, heavy blocks of metal moved through the dark of space at speeds that no eye could see. They struck Vraxi orbital cities with no warning. There was no flash. There was no sound. There was only, suddenly, a small new star where a city used to be, and then a slow rain of dust falling into the planet below. The Vraxi began to fear the empty sky more than they had ever feared a fleet. Within 4 weeks, the Vraxi had lost half their fleet. Within 6 weeks, they had lost their grip on every outer world. Within 7 weeks, the Vraxi king sent a message to the Concordat. He begged for help. He said the humans were wild animals. He said they were committing terrible crimes. He said the galaxy must come to the rescue of the poor Vraxi people. He cried into the camera. The Concordat watched the recording in silence. The Concordat sent investigators. The investigators were a careful old species who had seen many wars. They walked through the wreckage. They counted the bodies. They tested the air. They looked very hard, for the kind of thing that a scolding could be built on. They found dead Vraxi soldiers, yes. They found broken Vraxi ships. They found ruined Vraxi bases. But they did not find one dead Vraxi child. Not one. Not anywhere. The humans had not touched any city of Vraxi citizens. They had not bombed any school. They had not burned any hospital. They had hit only military targets. Only soldiers. Only ships. Only the men and women who made the Vraxi war machine work. They had even, in 3 places, gone out of their way to spare civilian buildings that stood right next to the targets. The investigators measured the strikes. They measured them again. They could not believe what they were seeing. And the humans were doing it with a skill the galaxy had never seen. The investigators wrote in their reports that the human attacks were surgical. That was the word they used, again and again. As if humans were not destroying an empire, but cutting out a sickness. As if humans were doctors with very steady hands, and the Vraxi war machine was a tumor they had decided to remove. This was, in a strange way, more frightening than blood and fire. Every Vraxi knew that the humans could have killed them all. The humans had the weapons. The humans had the chance. The humans were choosing not to. They were choosing to take only what they had come for. The choice itself was the message. We are not like you, the choice said. We could be, but we are not. Not yet. Adaiza Okonkwo, the Earth Secretary General, was called to the Concordat Hall. She walked in alone. She wore a black dress. She did not bring guards. She did not bring lawyers. She sat down in front of the council and waited. The council members looked at her differently now. They sat a little farther back in their chairs. They spoke a little more softly. The Centauran delegate spoke first. He was a small, soft creature with great, gentle eyes. His voice trembled. "Madam Secretary," he said, "when will this end? When will you stop?" Adaiza Okonkwo looked at him for a long moment. The whole hall was quiet. You could have heard a single breath from the back rows. "We stop when we decide to stop," she said. "That is what civilization was protecting you from. You should have remembered that before you let them murder our children." Then she stood up. She walked out. She did not look back. The doors closed behind her. In the silence she left. The great old council of the galaxy understood, perhaps for the first time, that the world they had known was already dead. The war ended in the 3rd month, but it did not end the way the Concordat thought it would. There was no big final battle. There was no mushroom cloud over Vraxis Prime. There was no human flag planted on the Vraxi King's palace. The galaxy waited for fire. The fire never came. Instead, one quiet morning, the Vraxi King woke up to find his guards gone. Not killed. Just gone. He walked through his halls, and they were empty. The breakfast table was set. The food was warm, but there was no servant to carry it, no general at the long meeting table, no admiral on the great map screens. The whole top of the Vraxi war state had been, in one single night, lifted away. The humans had taken 340 Vraxi. Only those 340. They were the men and women whose names had been on the orders that killed New Cascadia. The humans had a list. They had checked it twice. They had taken every name on it, and not one name more. Some of those taken were great lords. Some were quiet clerks who had only signed a paper. The list did not care about rank. The list cared about guilt. The Vraxi were brought to a human court on Earth. The court was open. Every world in the galaxy could watch it. Cameras were placed in every corner. The trial took 6 weeks. The evidence was clear. Recordings of the orders. Letters between officers. Maps of the strikes. The Vraxi defended themselves. They were given the best lawyers in the galaxy. The humans listened. The humans asked careful questions. There was no shouting. There was no torture. There was only, day after day, the slow piling up of facts. At the end of the trial, all 340 were found guilty. Their punishments were given out under human law, the same law that any human killer would face. Some were sent to prisons on far cold worlds. Some were given long, hard work for the rest of their lives. The king of the Vraxi was given the heaviest punishment of all. He had to read, every morning, the names of every person who had died at New Cascadia. There were 2,100,000 names. He would read them, the doctors said, for the rest of his natural life. He would grow old reading them. He would die reading them. After this, something happened that no one in the council had thought possible. The humans went home. They did not annex a single Vraxi world. They did not take a single piece of Vraxi land. They did not ask for money. They did not ask for slaves. They did not even ask for a public apology. They simply packed up their fleet and left. Their ships rose from Vraxi orbits and turned, all together, and went home. They left a Vraxi people who were broken, but alive. Their war machine was gone. Their proud army was gone. Their dreams of conquest were gone. But their children were still there. Their farms were still there. Their cities mostly were still there. They had, when all was counted, lost less than they had taken. They had been allowed to live. The humans had given them that gift. And the Vraxi knew, every one of them, that the gift had been a choice. The humans could have done worse. The humans had not. The humans had drawn a line and held to it, even when no one could have stopped them from crossing it. The Concordat held a great meeting after the war. Some of the older species wanted to throw Earth out of the council. They said humans had broken the treaties. They said humans were too dangerous. The vote was held. It failed. It failed because 3 other species, at the last moment, quietly changed their votes. They had been doing the math. They had seen what humans did when pushed. They had no wish to find out what humans did when cornered. The vote was never spoken of again. On Kepler 442b, where the colony of New Cascadia had once stood, humans built something new. They did not build a fortress. They did not build a temple to war. They built a garden. 2,300,000 trees were planted, one for every soul lost. Each tree had a name on its small stone. The garden was so big that a person could walk in it for many days and never see all the names. The wind through the leaves made a soft sound, like a long, patient breath. At the center of the garden stood a single gray stone. On it were carved Governor Elena Merith's last words. The whole speech, exactly as she had said it. The stone was simple. It had no decoration. It needed none. People came from every world to read it. Even Vraxi pilgrims came, in time, with their heads bowed. They were not stopped at the gate. They were welcomed in. They were given water and a quiet place to sit. Beside that stone, some years later, a second one was placed. This one had an inscription written in every language of the Concordat. The inscription was short. We came in peace. We will leave in peace. Between those 2 moments, do not test us. The story closes with Admiral Marcus Vance, now 73 years old, formally retiring for the 2nd time. He stood on a small wooden stage on Earth, in a quiet ceremony. The cameras of the galaxy were all there. He wore his old uniform. His grandchildren were in the front row. His face was tired, but at peace. A young Terran journalist, with great gentle eyes like her uncle the delegate, raised her small hand. Admiral Vance nodded to her. She asked the question that every species in the galaxy had been afraid to ask out loud. Admiral, she said, what did humanity learn from this war? Admiral Vance stood quietly for a long time. He looked out at the cameras. He looked at the sky. He thought of his old friend Tanaka, dead in the cold of space. He thought of Yuki Hassan, with her chair raised in the school door. He thought of Elena Merith, whose voice still played, sometimes, in his dreams. Then he smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a man who had carried a heavy thing for many years and was now setting it down in plain sight. We did not learn anything, he said. We remembered. There is a difference. The galaxy thought we were children playing at being civilized. We were never children. We were old, older than any of you knew. We just chose for a while to be gentle. That choice is ours. It has always been ours. He paused. He looked right into the camera. And the next species that mistakes our gentleness for weakness will not get a New Cascadia memorial. They will get nothing. Because there will be nothing left of them to remember. Then he stepped down from the stage and walked away. He did not give any other answers. He did not need to. The galaxy had heard him. The galaxy would not forget. His words went out on every channel that night, and again the next morning, and again the morning after that. They were copied and printed and carved into walls. They became, in time, the most repeated sentence in the new history of the stars. The final scene of the story is a simple one. It is the Great Hall of the Concordate Council. It is many months after the war. The leaders of the species sit in their tall chairs around the long table. There is one new chair at the table. It is the human chair. Without saying anything, without any rule being written, the chair has been moved. It is slightly higher than all the others. Not much higher. Just enough. Nobody sat in it for a long time, because Adaize Okonkwo was late that day. She was always a little late. The other delegates waited. They did not complain. They did not look at each other. They just waited, in silence, until she came in, until she took her seat, until she nodded and said, in her quiet voice, "Let us begin." And the galaxy, which had once thought it knew what humans were, learned to begin again.